Welcome to NextGen Timber, where raw wood meets modern machine power. Out here, timber is not just cut. It is hauled, crushed, lifted, dragged, processed, recovered, and pushed through some of the toughest conditions in the industry. Anybody can start a chainsaw and rev it, but that does not mean they understand timber work. Real cutting begins before the blade touches the wood. You have to read tension, pressure, lean, bind, weight, and movement. The danger is often hidden inside the timber, waiting for one wrong cut to release it. That is why the crew slows down and rethinks the cutting sequence. 3 cuts first, then rotate the section after that. That is not hesitation. That is experience. In timber work, rushing is how people get hurt and machines get destroyed. A patient crew usually lasts longer than a fast one. Then the mood changes for a second with a dog hanging from a branch like a tiny 4-legged logger. It chews, swings, and refuses to let go, completely locked into the job like that stick owes it money. Even in rough timber footage, sometimes the funniest worker on site has pause. Then things turn serious again. A firefighter cuts into a massive burned tree, hollowed out from the inside. The trunk is still standing, but the core is already gone. Ash and sawdust fill the air while every cut weakens the shell even more. Burned trees are unpredictable. They may look solid from the outside, but inside, the structure can already be failing. A powerful stump grinder moves into position beside a massive fallen tree. The cutting wheel bites into the wood, throwing chips across the ground as the operator sweeps side to side. Layer after layer disappears until oversized timber is reduced to mulch. It is brute force, but controlled. That is what makes it industrial. The recovery scene already looks bad before it begins. Deep snow around the chassis, frozen ground underneath, a truck sunk almost to the frame, and temperatures cold enough to punish every tool on site. Some recoveries look cursed from the start, and this is one of them. In conditions like this, every pull, every shovel, and every movement matters. Then the footage moves back into logging history. Rivers once carried timber out of remote forests before trucks and hydraulic loaders took over. Workers guided huge floating log piles downstream using poles, ropes, boats, and hard-earned experience. Log jams could form without warning, forcing men onto unstable timber to break them apart. It was dangerous, rough, and absolutely foundational to industrial timber transport. Logging accidents happen fast. One bad step, one shift in footing, one piece of wood moving sooner than expected, and control disappears in less than a second. That is why this work can never become routine, no matter how many times someone has done it. Then someone asks the obvious question. If the plan was to drop the whole tree anyway, why climb it first? Fair point. In forestry, some decisions look questionable from the ground. Then the Shears VM series arrives and changes the pace completely. This machine does not politely process vegetation. It attacks it. Whole trees go in, mulch comes out, and the landscape changes in a single pass. Aggressive, efficient, and built for serious industrial clearing, this is NextGen Timber machinery doing exactly what it was designed to do. Next, an old logging truck loaded high with massive timber pushes into a fast-moving river crossing. Water crashes against the wheels while the truck fights forward under a heavy stack of logs. Every bump under the surface shifts the load slightly, and the driver has to keep just enough momentum to avoid getting pushed sideways by the current. Too slow, and the river wins. Too fast, and the whole rig could lose balance. Somehow, the driver keeps it moving and forces the loaded truck across one of the riskiest crossings in the timber world. At the processing line, logs move along the conveyor while workers guide them into the system. The machine feeds each section forward, sorting and handling timber in a steady rhythm. Manual control and automated handling work together, turning scattered logs into continuous production. This is where raw forest material becomes organized industrial output. Luck barely saves the next situation. The falling tree clips the fence, brushes the shed, narrowly misses the vehicle, and somehow avoids becoming a full disaster. But let's be honest, it landed almost exactly where everyone feared it would. That is not a clean success. That is a mistake that got lucky. Then reality hits. This is not what anyone expected. In timber work, that usually means the job has moved from production into damage control. Before anyone checks the machine, they check the people. You okay? Matters more than any truck, saw, or load of wood. The next section of timber is already a problem before it even moves. Everyone can see that bringing it back downhill later will be a headache. Heavy wood on a slope is not just cargo. A hydraulic loader lifts an extremely long log and swings it toward the trailer. The timber flexes under its own weight, one end dragging before it clears the pile. The operator adjusts slowly because oversized logs do not forgive sloppy movement. When it finally settles onto the trailer, the scale of the load becomes obvious. Deep in harsh forest terrain, the LKT-81 Turbo keeps dragging oversized timber through mud, slopes, and unstable ground. Normal equipment would stop, but this machine keeps pulling. That mix of traction, torque, and operator control is why forestry tractors like this still earn respect. High in a tree, a worker cuts a large branch while balancing in a dangerous position. As the limb separates, it drops fast and swings through the smaller branches below. It is a simple reminder that once a cut is finished, if you are into heavy logging, giant saws, rough recoveries, and machines working in brutal places, subscribe to NextGen Timber. There is a lot more steel, timber, and controlled chaos coming. But the danger comes back fast. A loaded logging truck loses traction while climbing uphill. The truck starts sliding backward, the logs shift violently, and timber spills loose down the slope. In seconds, the road becomes a danger zone. That is one of the worst failures in hauling, when the load stops being cargo and becomes a moving hazard. Then we see the small plastic wedges that surprise people outside the industry. They look harmless until they help redirect a massive tree. Tiny tools controlling giant timber sounds ridiculous until you watch it work. Sometimes control does not come from size. It comes from placement. A heavy logging truck crawls along a narrow, rural road with timber stacked high above the cab. The suspension compresses under the load, the truck leans through uneven ground, and every turn has to be slow. In hauling, balance matters as much as horsepower. One sudden shift can destabilize the entire rig. The next machine sounds brutal before it even moves. Turbo whistle, deep engine vibration, slow crawling speed, exposed components, and cooling systems fighting heat under load. Operators driving equipment like this through rough ground earn every meter. That scene sums up the industry perfectly. Huge weight, unstable ground, heavy equipment, and no space for careless decisions. NextGen Timber work looks powerful, but behind every move is calculation. One mistake can turn a routine haul into a full recovery operation.
Ini kayu yang ketiga nih, kayu ketiga.
Further down the road, another logging truck loses control. The trailer shifts, logs break loose, and heavy timber bounces across the road like a storm made of wood and steel. 1 second, it is transport. The next, it is chaos.
Mau turun susah ini.
This is NextGen Timber. Real forestry, real machine power, dangerous cuts, heavy hauling, brutal recoveries, and timber operations running right at the edge of control. Subscribe for more giant saws, heavy forestry equipment, dangerous tree work, industrial wood processing, and raw moments from deep inside the timber world. Stay sharp, trust the machine, and never underestimate gravity when the forest starts moving. Then a forestry forwarder fights through deep mud. The heavy machine leans as its wheels sink unevenly, the loaded rear section twisting under pressure. The operator has to work carefully because one wrong move could make the machine tip further. Soft ground does not just slow equipment down, it pulls it apart piece by piece. Finally, a large excavator moves in around an old stump and starts tearing through the ground. The bucket rips into buried roots, breaks compacted soil, and pulls from different angles until the stump finally starts to give way. What looks like a simple leftover piece of tree is actually a buried anchor of wood, dirt, and resistance. Only steady hydraulic force finally breaks it free. That is the future and the reality of timber work in one place. Old school risk, modern machines, heavy wood, bad terrain, and operators who have to make every decision count. This is NextGen Timber, where the forest does not give second chances.